All right, welcome in everyone. Ready to dive into something most people would say is a total snooze fest.
Sounds right up my alley. What are we tackling today?
India's Employee Provident Fund, or EPF as most people call it.
Retirement planning, got it.
Yeah.
But something tells me there's more to it than meets the eye, right?
You hit the nail on the head. This isn't just about stashing away cash for your golden years. We're talking about a system that's practically woven into the fabric of daily life in India, even popped up in the news recently, actually.
Oh, that's interesting. What's got everyone talking about EPF all of a sudden?
It's more like what EPF can do for you even before retirement. We're talking about potential lifelines during emergencies, ways to navigate job changes smoothly, all sorts of things most people aren't aware of.
Sounds like we've got a lot to unpack then. Where do we even begin?
Well, we've got a stack of sources to dig through. We're talking the actual EPF Act of 1952, some FAQs from the official website, even a real person's request for their account info, the whole shebang.
Wow, going all in. So before we get lost in the weeds, what's the game plan for this deep dive?
Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to equip you with the knowledge to navigate EPF like a pro. Whether you're starting your first job, switching careers, or just curious about how this massive system works, we've got you covered.
Love it. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to something as important as your finances.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off with the basics. Our trustee, EPF, all about EPF, its rules, tax benefits, contribution, and lock and source, tells us the gist is pretty simple. You put in 12% of your salary, your employer matches it, and bam, retirement nest egg in the making.
Sounds straightforward enough. What's the catch?
Oh, there's always a catch. And that's where things get interesting. This is where our friend, the EPF Fact 1952.pdf, comes in. As dry as it might sound, this document holds the answers to some surprisingly complex questions.
Oh, I love a good deep dive into the legal jargon. What kind of questions are we talking about?
Well, for starters, ever wonder which companies are actually required to participate in EPF?
I have to admit, I always figured it was based solely on the size of the company. If
Yeah.
you've got a certain number of employees, you're in.
That's what most people think, right? But it turns out the Act actually gets into the specifics of which industries are mandated to participate, regardless of their employee count.
Interesting. So it's not just a numbers game then. What else does it delve into?
Well, there's a whole section on what actually constitutes basic wages for calculating those contributions.
Okay, basic wages doesn't exactly scream riveting conversation starter.
I know, right? But trust me, this is where it gets juicy. Because it's not just about semantics. It directly impacts how much money actually ends up in your EPF account.
Now we're talking. So we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of how those contributions are actually calculated.
Exactly. This is the foundation of your retirement savings, so understanding these nuances is crucial.
Makes sense. So let's say you're someone who, gets a little restless in their career, always hopping from one opportunity to the next. What happens to your EPF then?
Can you really take it with you every time you switch jobs?
That's a great question, and it's something a lot of people are curious about.
Because let's be real, nobody wants to deal with a mountain of paperwork every time they switch things up.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thankfully, EPF has you covered there. Our trustee, EPFO.
FAQ source confirms you can actually transfer your account online.
Oh, wow. So it's surprisingly simple then.
Relatively speaking, yes.
Right.
The system is designed to be pretty user-friendly, which is a huge plus.
That is a relief.
Yeah.
But what about those, let's call them curveballs life throws your way?
The unexpected expenses, the sudden emergencies, those sorts of things.
Exactly. What if someone needs to access their EPF funds before retirement due to, say, a financial emergency? That's where this whole compassionate withdrawal thing comes in, right?
Yeah.
I saw that mentioned somewhere in our research.
You got it. The FAQs actually go into quite a bit of detail on this, and it's more common than you might think.
Really? I have to admit, I didn't even know that was an option until we started digging into this. It's one of those things that often gets overlooked, but it's incredibly important. We're talking about situations like medical emergencies, natural disasters, even facing foreclosure on a home loan.
Wow, so it really does cover some major life events. Like EPF has these built-in safety nets to help you navigate those unexpected bumps in the road.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that life doesn't always go according to plan, and sometimes you need access to your savings sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And it's not just about accessing your own contributions either, right? Our EPF, all about EPF, its rules, tax benefits, contribution, and lock-in source, mentions something about death benefits as well.
Right, so this is where things get a bit, let's just say it's not the most cheerful aspect of EPF, but it's crucial nonetheless. We're talking about ensuring your family is financially protected even the most difficult of circumstances.
That's a side of EPF most people probably don't even want to think about until they have to.
It's understandable. But the EPF Act 1952.PDF actually goes into detail about this, outlining how the system safeguards a member's family financially in case of their passing.
So there are systems in place to make sure everything is handled fairly and appropriately.
Precisely. And it gets even more interesting. There are safeguards to prevent, well, let's just say, someone benefiting financially from a member's untimely demise. It's not a pleasant thought, but it highlights how the system tries to consider various possibilities and protect its members.
It's like they've thought of everything. But let's shift gears a bit to those hidden benefits we were talking about earlier. You mentioned using EPF for things like home loans and education. That's pretty amazing if you ask me.
Right. Most people think of EPF as this untouchable sum until retirement, but it can actually be a valuable resource throughout your life, not just your golden years.
So it's less about locking your money away and more about having it work for you when you need it most.
Exactly. You can withdraw funds for buying a house, funding your children's education, even covering certain medical expenses, out of the right circumstances, of course.
Okay, so there are some rules and eligibility criteria we should probably mention.
Of course, there always are. But the key takeaway here is that EPF offers way more flexibility than people realize, and understanding these options can make a world of difference in your financial planning.
Okay, so we've got flexibility, safety nets, potential lifelines. Is there anything EPF doesn't do?
Well, it doesn't magically erase your tax obligations, unfortunately.
Right, but I seem to recall something about some tax advantages.
Oh, absolutely. And this is a big one. Both your contributions and your employer's contributions are eligible for income tax deductions. It's a win-win.
It's like getting a little bonus from the tax man just for being responsible with your savings. Speaking of bonuses, we can't forget about the recent buzz surrounding EPF in the Budget 2024 announcements.
Yes. This new scheme is generating a lot of buzz, and for good reason. It's all about encouraging young people, those just starting out in their careers, to join the formal workforce and start their EPF journey early.
Which is huge, but how exactly are they planning to do that? What's the incentive?
Well, the government is offering a direct benefit transfer to first-time employees in the formal sector. It's a pretty significant sum, too. 1 month's salary capped at $15,000.
Okay, so it's not exactly finding a winning lottery ticket, but a government-sponsored bonus is pretty close. And this money is paid directly to their bank accounts.
That's right. Paid out in installments, no less.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sweet deal, designed to make that formal sector job a little more enticing.
Okay, so who exactly qualifies for this? Are there any specific criteria?
There are a few, yes. You need to be a first-time employee in the formal sector and earning a salary within a certain cap. It's all outlined in Employee Provident Fund Organization, what is EPFO, structure, services, and latest updates.
Sounds like a strategic move to boost formal employment, especially with so many young people these days gravitating towards the gig economy. It's like they're sweetening the deal to make that 9-to-5 grind a bit more appealing, especially for younger folks just starting their careers.
Exactly. And when you think about the bigger picture, this could lead to a huge boost in retirement savings for a whole generation.
Talk about a win-win, right? But before we wrap things up, there's one more thing about EPF that I found super interesting. Remember that EPF scheme.pdf document we dug up?
The one that looked like it was written in a different language. Yeah, what about it?
Well, somewhere in all that jargon, they mentioned something called an inoperative account, and it totally caught my eye.
Oh, right. Those are the EPF accounts that have been inactive for a certain amount of time, right? Usually because someone switched jobs and just forgot about it. Happens all the time, actually.
Exactly. And that got me thinking, what happens to all that money just sitting there? We're talking about a system with millions of contributors, so those inactive accounts could add up to a serious chunk of change.
It's like a whole other layer of the EPF onion, isn't it? We spend so much time talking about the ins and outs of managing your account, but what about those forgotten funds?
Right. Are there systems in place to track down these people? And what if someone suddenly remembers they had an old account from way back when? Can they still access that money? So many questions.
It really makes you wonder about the sheer scale of it all and how much money might be out there just waiting to be claimed.
Talk about a financial mystery, right? But that's probably a deep dive for another day.
Definitely. But hey, I think we covered a lot of ground today. We started with what seemed like a pretty straightforward retirement savings plan, but we ended up uncovering a whole world of hidden benefits and surprising flexibility.
Not to mention those potential lifelines during emergencies and the safeguards in place for your loved ones. It's like EPF has your back at every stage of life, not just your golden years.
Absolutely. And the biggest takeaway, knowledge is power, my friend. The more you know about systems like EPF, the better equipped you'll be to make smart financial decisions for yourself and your family.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So next time someone mentions EPF, don't just tune them out. Remember this deep dive. Think about the hidden opportunities and the peace of mind that comes with understanding this often overlooked system.
Who knows, you might just uncover some hidden financial potential of your own.
That's all the time we have for today, folks, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the topics that matter most to you. Until next time.